Wesley Whitaker didn't believe in weddings, he believed in mergers, acquisitions, and cutting losses before things got messy. So when his best friend, Drew, begged him to fly out to some countryside estate in upstate New York just to stand there and clap, Wesley almost said no. Almost. "Come on, man, I need you. You're the only one who won't get drunk and ruin my speech," Drew had pleaded. Wesley had rolled his eyes and muttered something about wasting a Saturday, but deep down, he didn't mind being there for his friend. What he didn't expect was that one wedding would ruin every rule he'd ever set for himself. Because the moment he stepped out of the black SUV and onto the gravel driveway of the vineyard estate, he saw her. Standing under an arch of white roses, facing away from him, hair up in a messy twist, fussing with the flowers lining the aisle. She wasn't in a gown or anything fancy, just a simple navy blue dress that hugged her waist and dipped off one shoulder. She looked stressed and stunning all at once. "Need help?" Wesley asked before he could stop himself. She turned, blushed a little, and gave him a polite but distracted nod. "Only if you're good with zip ties and hydrangeas. I run a billion-dollar company. I think I can handle flowers." She raised a brow. "Wow." Humble, he grinned, stepping forward. "Wesley?" "Nola," she replied, brushing her hands on her dress. "Nola Vale. I'm the bride's cousin/unofficial wedding manager because the planner quit this morning." Wesley blinked. "Seriously?" "Oh yeah." Screamed something about peacocks and ran. "Sounds like a party." "You have no idea." He didn't. But he was about to. For the next 4 hours, Wesley stuck by Nola's side like duct tape on a cracked pipe. She gave orders, adjusted centerpieces, calmed the flower girl who dropped her basket in a puddle, and somehow still managed to laugh when the ring bearer ate half the cake topper. Every time Wesley offered help, she gave it to him without hesitation. She wasn't impressed by his tailored suit or the watch worth more than most people's cars. She didn't know who he was, and he liked it that way. "I'm guessing you don't do this often," she said as they folded napkins in the back room. "Help with weddings." "Not unless someone's marrying a stock portfolio." She laughed, a real one, the kind that made his chest feel like someone had flipped a switch inside it. "So tell me, Wesley, if you hate weddings so much, why are you here, friend of the groom?" "That's the only reason." He looked at her, really looked at her. It was. The ceremony went off without a hitch after that. The bride cried, the groom stammered through his vows. The DJ botched the first dance song, but nobody cared because love was in the air and the wine was flowing. Wesley wasn't drinking. He never did at public events. But he stood by the bar, watching Nola laugh with her aunt, still handling details even after the cake had been cut. He stepped over. "Dance with me," she blinked. "Now, yeah, you've earned it." She hesitated for half a second, then set her clipboard down and took his hand. They moved onto the dance floor just as a slow song started. He rested his hand on her waist, and she leaned in a little closer than he expected. "You're not bad at this," she said softly. "Not bad at a lot of things," he murmured. She looked up at him then, and the moment stretched like something in the air, shifted, quieted, settled. "Why do I get the feeling you're not who you pretend to be?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around them, crystal chandeliers, strings of lights, the soft scent of roses in the air, and then back at her. "Because you're right." She didn't press, just smiled. "Let me guess, you're secretly in the mafia, worse. Corporate America." She laughed again, and he wanted to keep hearing that sound for the rest of the night. They ended up on the patio after the last song faded, stars overhead, her heels in her hand, his jacket draped over her shoulders. "I haven't had this much fun since college," she said, sipping one last glass of champagne. "You're good at it." "At what?" "Running the show, keeping everyone calm." "I work in event coordination," she said with a shrug. "Small company, not glamorous. But I pay my own rent and I'm good at what I do." He nodded, impressed. "You ever think about doing it bigger?" "Can't afford to. I've got student loans and a car that sounds like it's dying every time I turn the key." Wesley looked at her, something tugging harder at his chest now. "What if you could?" She turned to him, curious. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, if you ever wanted to go bigger, I'd fund it." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you offering me a job?" "No, I'm offering you a shot." She paused, then shook her head with a soft laugh. You're ridiculous. I'm serious. I don't even know your last name, Whitaker. Her eyes widened. Wait, Whitaker? As in Whitaker Holdings, he gave a small nod. She groaned and covered her face. You're not just rich. You're billionaire rich. I didn't lie. You didn't have to. He watched her, unsure what she was going to do. But then she dropped her hands, looked up at him and said, I should be annoyed, but for some reason I'm not. Because you feel it too, he said quietly. She didn't answer. But she didn't walk away either. When he left the next morning, it felt wrong, like unfinished business. He didn't even get her number. She hadn't offered, and he hadn't asked. But as the black SUV pulled away from the vineyard, Wesley Whitaker leaned back in the leather seat, staring out the window, his jaw tight. He'd gone to the wedding to support a friend. He never thought he'd leave falling in love. Wesley rarely checked his calendar himself. His assistant usually filtered out anything that didn't involve investors, boardroom decisions, or quarterly forecasts, but on Monday morning, he scrolled through it 3 times, hoping by some miracle he'd see her name. He didn't. He told himself it was fine. People met at weddings and didn't always follow up. It was just a night. A strange, electric, unforgettable night. He still couldn't shake it by Tuesday. He'd pulled her name from the RSVP list. Drew's bride gave it to him without asking questions. Nola Vale. And an address in Brooklyn. He didn't go there, but he did start walking to meetings instead of taking the car. He skipped the driver, the usual penthouse lunch delivery, and even canceled a board dinner. His staff noticed. He didn't care. What's going on with you? Drew asked on a call that Wednesday. You ducked out of the quarterly review halfway through. It was redundant. It was 3 slides in. Wesley didn't answer. Drew continued. You're not still thinking about my wife's cousin, are you? Don't. I'm just saying I said don't. There was a pause. Then Drew said, okay, but if you're not going to call her, stop acting like you're waiting for her to walk through your office door. Wesley hung up without replying. By Friday, he cracked. He didn't send flowers. He didn't do grand gestures without purpose. Instead, he showed up at the address he'd been sitting on all week, unsure what he was even going to say. He told himself he was just going to thank her for her help, for the dance, for the memory. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the full truth either. The building was a narrow brownstone with chipping paint and a busted intercom. He pressed the buzzer with her name on it and waited. Nothing. He pressed it again. Still nothing. He turned to leave, and that's when the door creaked open behind him. A girl with short curls and paint on her cheek leaned out. She's not home. Wesley stepped back. You know where she went? She's working a catering event in Midtown, some kind of gallery thing. She said something about needing to fix the lighting layout. He hesitated. You know the gallery? Yeah, Artema, on West 37th. He thanked her and turned toward the street without another word, already pulling out his phone to reroute his driver. The gallery was glass and steel, all sharp angles and pretentious lighting. Inside, people sipped champagne and nodded at sculptures that looked like scrap metal. Wesley didn't care about any of it. He spotted her across the room, standing on a ladder, adjusting a spotlight with one hand while balancing a clipboard in the other. She wore a navy jumpsuit with a tool belt slung low on her hips. Her hair was pinned back with 2 clips, and her brow was furrowed in concentration. He waited until she climbed down. You're not supposed to be here, she said the second she saw him. I know. You tracked me down. I asked your cousin for your address. That's borderline stalker behavior. He slid his hands into his pockets. I've been called worse. She gave him a long, unreadable look. Why? He didn't flinch. Because it's been 6 days and I haven't thought about anything else. She blinked once. Then again, you don't even know me. I know you kept a wedding from falling apart when no one else could. I know you handled chaos better than most CEOs I've met. And I know that I haven't met someone who made me want to rearrange my entire week just for a chance to see them again. She looked away, adjusting a cable. That's not a reason. That's a feeling. Then let me turn it into something real. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she nodded toward the back hallway. I need to finish checking the sound setup. You want to talk? Walk with me? He followed her past the gallery walls and into a narrow corridor lined with storage crates and extension cords. I wasn't playing hard to get, she said as they walked. I just didn't think you were serious. I am, and I didn't want anything complicated. He stopped walking. Do I look like someone who does simple? She turned to face him. No, you look like someone who breaks things just to see if they can be rebuilt. Something flickered in his chest. He stepped closer just enough to close the space between them. I don't want to break anything, he said quietly. I want to build something that doesn't fall apart the first time it's tested. She tilted her head, studying him. You're used to people saying yes. Yes, I'm not one of them. He looked at her for a long moment. Then what are you? I'm someone who needs time and honesty. And space to breathe, he nodded. I can give you all of that. She folded her arms. And what do you want in return? Dinner, with no wedding music, no flower emergencies, and no clipboard. She almost smiled, not quite, but the corner of her mouth moved just enough. I finish here at 9. I'll be waiting. He left without touching her, without another word. But as he stepped back into the night, the cool air felt different against his skin. Sharper, clearer. Wesley Whitaker didn't chase people, but tonight he was chasing her. By the time Nola stepped out of the gallery, the streetlights had flickered on, and the city had softened into its nighttime rhythm, horns less sharp, crowds thinned, shadows stretching over sidewalks. She spotted Wesley leaning against a black town car parked at the curb, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, tie stuffed in his pocket. He looked like he belonged at a high-stakes negotiation, not waiting outside a gallery for someone who just spent the evening wrangling lighting cables. You didn't have to wait, she said as she approached. I didn't want to leave. She glanced at the car. This is yours? No, I stole it, he said dryly and opened the door for her. You hungry? She hesitated as she slid in. Depends. Are you taking me someplace where they hand you a menu or just a tasting experience that costs more than my rent? There'll be a menu. And bread. She raised an eyebrow. Bread I don't have to pay extra for, his mouth curved. Unlimited. The restaurant was tucked beneath a hotel near Central Park, dim lighting, velvet booths, hand-painted ceilings. It wasn't loud or flashy. It felt intentional, thoughtful, and that unsettled her more than any diamond-studded rooftop affair would have. The hostess led them to a corner table already set, a single candle flickering between them. As soon as they sat, a server appeared with a bottle of wine already opened. Nola looked at Wesley. They know you. I've brought clients here. She traced the edge of her napkin. So is this what you do? Take people to 5-star places and make them feel like you're paying attention? No, he didn't blink. I only do that when I mean it. She bit the inside of her cheek and looked down at the menu. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Arrogance. Polished charm, a guy who hands out compliments like business cards. And what did you get? You, apparently, still figuring out what that means. The server returned to pour their wine. Once he left, Wesley leaned in slightly, resting his forearms on the table. I want to understand how you see the world. That's a loaded request. I can handle it. She took a sip of wine. I see it as unpredictable. People walk into your life and leave without warning. Success doesn't guarantee happiness. And sometimes the only way to stay upright is to keep moving. You don't let people in easily. No, she said, and you don't usually ask for permission before stepping in. I'm trying tonight. She looked up. Why? Because I don't want to be a distraction. I want to be something that matters. The food arrived, plates of roasted sea bass and handmade pasta. She picked at hers, more focused on the way he studied her between bites, like he was trying to read past her words. Between courses, he asked, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken? Leaving my old job, I had no backup plan, no savings. I just knew I couldn't be in that environment another day. What happened? I freelanced, took on anything I could, slept on couches for a while. It was messy. But I could breathe again. Do you regret it? No, it made me sharper. He nodded, then looked down at his plate. I've never made a decision without a contingency plan. She leaned back. Sounds safe. It's suffocating. Their eyes met across the table. The candlelight caught the faintest flicker behind his gaze, something restrained, but aching to be seen. After dessert, he didn't rush to leave. They sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of conversation settle between them. When they finally stepped back into the night, she crossed her arms, letting the cool air wash over her. You didn't ask me anything about work, she said. I didn't come to talk about logistics, I noticed. I wanted to hear who you are without the clipboard. She glanced at him. And I like her even more. They walked without speaking for a block before she stopped on the corner. I'm not sure what this is. He turned to face her. It doesn't have to be anything yet, but it feels like something. Yes, he said. It does. She looked past him at the street, the cars, the rhythm of the city, then back at him. I don't want to be an escape from your routine. You're not, he said quietly. You're the reason I'm finally stepping out of it. His voice was steady, certain, but it wasn't a line. It wasn't designed to sweep her off her feet. It felt real, and that scared her more than anything. I should go, she said. I'll call you tomorrow. She nodded once. Then turned and walked toward the subway station without looking back. He didn't follow, he didn't have to. Because for the first time in years, Wesley Whitaker wasn't strategizing what came next. He was feeling it. All of it. And that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever had. The rooftop was quiet except for the wind brushing against the glass railings and the distant hum of the city below. A string quartet played softly near the far side, their music weaving into the evening air. Dozens of guests in black tie attire moved through clusters of candlelit cocktail tables, champagne flutes in hand. Wesley stood near the edge, alone, watching the skyline. His suit was darker than most, crisp lines pressed into the sleeves, but there was something restless in the way he held his glass untouched, forgotten. You're not working the room, Drew said as he joined him, adjusting his cufflinks. I didn't come to network. You're standing at the most exclusive fundraiser in Manhattan. That's like buying a Ferrari and never driving it. Wesley glanced sideways at him. I came because I funded the hospital wing this gala is celebrating. That, and you're hoping she shows up. She won't. You don't know that. She hasn't answered any of the messages I left. Drew paused, then asked, what did you say? That I wanted to see her again. That I wasn't done. Well, maybe she is, or maybe she's scared. You ever think about that? Not everyone sees risk the way you do. Wesley didn't respond. Drew gave him a look, then disappeared back into the crowd. The quartet shifted into something slower, softer, and that's when Wesley saw her. She stepped out of the elevator with one hand still on the strap of her bag, clearly unsure if she belonged. Her dress was understated, black with a high neckline and sleeves that grazed her elbows. Her hair was down, parted cleanly, no clips or pins holding it in place. She looked like she'd fought with herself the entire cab ride over. He didn't move. Not until she did. She walked toward him slowly, her eyes on the floor until she was just in front of him. I'm late, she said. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't either. He waited. She glanced over her shoulder at the crowd. Your world's louder than mine. I'll turn the volume down. Her gaze returned to his. I don't know how to do this. I've never let someone into my life while it was still messy. I'm not looking for perfection, she exhaled, but it wasn't relief. You're used to control. I'm not someone you can predict. I'm not trying to. You say that now, but what happens when I can't give you clean answers? When I need space or time or I'll wait, he said, her shoulders dropped slightly. Why? Because I'd rather wait for something real than fill my life with things that look perfect and feel hollow. She looked away, the skyline behind her glowing gold and silver. I didn't come here to give you a yes. I didn't ask for one. I came because I didn't want to wonder what would have happened if I didn't, he nodded. That's enough for tonight. She turned back to him. I don't want to be a footnote. You won't be. I don't want to be a phase between your next acquisition and whatever comes after. He stepped forward, closing the space between them. You're not a phase. You're the reason I started asking myself what I actually want instead of just what I'm good at. She stared at him for a long time, then quietly, I don't know if I can be what you need. I don't need a partner who checks boxes. I need one who tells me when I'm wrong, who challenges me, who stays grounded when everything else feels like it's spinning. And you think that's me? I know it is. The quartet shifted again, this time into a piece she didn't recognize. He extended his hand. Dance with me. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They moved slowly, the city behind them, her head resting lightly against his chest as he led them in small, deliberate steps. I'm not used to this much quiet, she murmured. Get used to it. I plan to give you more of it. She looked up at him. You're serious? I've never been more. The music faded, but neither of them moved. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't make any promises he couldn't keep, but when she pulled back, her eyes were steadier. Okay, she said. Yeah, I don't know what this is yet. But I want to find out, he nodded once. Then we start here. They left together, his jacket over her shoulders, the night stretching out in front of them like something they hadn't dared to hope for. And Wesley, who came to the wedding just to clap for someone else's love story, finally stepped into his own. The smell of fresh paint hung in the air as Nola stepped through the open glass doors of the new office space. Natural light streamed in through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden hue over the polished concrete floors. A stack of unopened boxes sat near the reception desk, and across the room, a long conference table gleamed beneath a modern chandelier still awaiting installation. You're early, Wesley said from behind her. He was holding 2 coffees and wearing a dark vest over a gray button-down, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. I thought I'd beat you here. I couldn't sleep, she replied, taking one of the cups. The contractor called at 6. Said the signage was installed crooked, already fixed. She looked around slowly, eyes sweeping across the open plan floor. It's bigger than I imagined. You told me what you wanted. I just made sure the space matched your vision. I didn't ask for this. You didn't have to, she turned to him. You do realize this makes you an investor, right? I'm aware. That means I'll be sending you monthly updates, budget breakdowns. Profit forecasts. He stepped closer, his tone even. And I won't be micromanaging. This is your company. I just gave it a foundation. She studied him, unsure whether to feel grateful or overwhelmed. You really don't expect anything in return. I expect you to build something brilliant, he said. That's it. She took another sip, letting the silence stretch. Then, I'm not used to people showing up this consistently. I'm not used to wanting to. They stood there in the middle of a space not yet filled with desks, ideas still waiting to be born. It felt like possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Nola didn't feel like she was bracing for disappointment. That evening, they attended a dinner hosted by a design firm that had reached out after seeing Nola's event work in a recent gallery showcase. The invitation had arrived unexpectedly, and she'd nearly declined. But Wesley had simply said, "You should be seen," and arranged for a stylist to deliver a gown that made her feel like she'd stepped out of another life. The event was held on the rooftop garden of a historic hotel, fairy lights strung between ivy-covered trellises, and a jazz trio playing softly beneath the stars. Nola moved through the crowd with ease, fielding questions about her company's launch, her previous projects, and what she was building next. Wesley watched her from across the space, arms folded, expression unreadable. Later, as they walked toward the car, she asked, "Was I talking too much? You were magnetic." She laughed, surprised. "That's not a word I've ever been called. It fits." She glanced at him sideways. "You didn't look like you were enjoying yourself." "I enjoyed watching you. In a creepy way or a supportive one, definitely supportive." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that came from a place of ease, not effort. Inside the car, she rested her head against the window. "I used to think people like you couldn't exist in my world. And now, I'm starting to think you were the piece I didn't realize was missing." He reached over and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You filled in a part I didn't know was hollow." Weeks passed in a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. She took meetings. He made space in his calendar. They didn't try to define what they were, but neither pulled away. They moved like two people who understood the weight of timing and the risk of hesitation. Then one night, as she locked up her office after a successful client pitch, she found him waiting outside with a small white box in his hands. "What's this?" she asked as he handed it to her. "Open it." Inside was a brass key, simple, unadorned. "I know you like your own space," he said, "but I've been thinking about what it would look like if you had one more key on your ring." She looked up at him. "To what? My place, no pressure, no timeline, just a door that's always open to you." She ran her thumb over the key and exhaled slowly. "You never push, why is that?" because you don't need pushing, you just need someone who never walks away. She stepped forward and kissed him, not out of impulse, but certainty. They spent weekends at farmers' markets and late nights building mood boards for her next event clients. He taught her how to cook something other than pasta. She taught him how to sleep past 6. When he flew to Singapore for meetings, they counted down the time until he was back. When she landed her first 6-figure contract, he showed up with a bottle of champagne and a grin that made her knees weak. They didn't talk about forever right away. But it lingered in the way he reached for her hand in crowds, or how she left a toothbrush in his drawer without saying anything. It lived in the quiet mornings, the shared playlists, the way they always returned to each other at the end of the day. 1 year later, they stood in a glass-walled room overlooking the city, surrounded by family, friends, and the people whose lives they'd touched along the way. The ceremony was small, personal. No peacocks, no drama. Just vows exchanged beneath an arch of soft white hydrangeas, and 2 people who had rewritten every assumption they'd made about who they were and what they deserved. Nola wore a gown with no train, no veil, just clean lines and a slight shimmer that caught the light when she moved. Wesley stood beside her in a classic black suit, no tie, his eyes never leaving hers. "I didn't believe in fate," she said, voice steady. "But then you walked into that wedding like some reverse storm, everything calmer after you arrived." He smiled, emotion flickering in his jaw. "I spent years building walls so nothing could touch me, and then you walked through all of them like they were made of paper. There were no fireworks. No choreographed dances, just the feeling of something whole finally settling into place." Nola's company expanded quickly, but she kept it grounded, no unnecessary flash, just excellence. Wesley took on fewer projects, choosing ones that aligned with his values instead of just his bottom line. They traveled, they stayed in. They celebrated small wins with big breakfasts and made space for each other's dreams. Sometimes they danced in the kitchen. Sometimes they fought about things that mattered, but they always came back to the same truth: they were better because they chose each other. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to, and that made all the difference.